Just so everybody's aware, we're just waiting for one more board member to show up so that we have quorum, and then we can start the meeting. Yes.
Don't forget to leave.
Good evening. I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Education to order. It is Tuesday, October 16th, and the Portland Board of Public Education is meeting in council chambers at City Hall. Would the superintendent please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Atkinson.
Here.
Ms. Seeliger, Ms. Vendil, Ms. Davis, Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Morioni.
Here.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Presente.
Mr. Balfons.
Here.
Ms. Clater.
Here.
Ms. Farah. Ms. Uri.
Here.
Ms. Power-Rakowski. And Chair Tavaro.
Here. And Ms. Davis did let me know that she is home taking care of a family member this evening. She won't be able to join us. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the report of the chair this evening, I just wanted to report on a couple of events that I was able to attend this last week. Last Wednesday, Board Member Rodriguez and I were able to attend the City Council's Legislative committee meeting. This is a subcommittee of the council that follows legislation during the legislative session and keeps in contact with our legislative delegation from Portland. And this, our participation with this committee has kind of ebbed and flowed over the years, but this year, Councilor Ali is chairing the committee, and he invited us to participate. They're kind of revamping their rules and procedures and how they're going to be following bills and what their priorities are. So we were able to attend and be part of that. And Mr. Rodriguez is going to be the liaison from the board to attend those meetings going forward. It will be a great opportunity for us to be able to track budget bills and school funding bills as they go through, and also to have that contact both with our legislative delegation and with the council as we head into budget season. So thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for volunteering to do that. Last night, I was able to attend the Presumpscot community meeting on the enrollment and capacity study. Mr. Atkinson and Mr. Rodriguez were also there. Thank you for attending that. It was well attended. I think we have a number of these so far under our belt and a number still to go. The superintendent will be reporting a little more about that, but I just wanted to thank board members for coming. It was a pretty large turnout, a lot of passion in the room, and good input, I think, brought to the table. So thank you both for attending that. I also just wanted to note, to mark your calendars, we have marked November 5th for the State of the Schools address. It'll be here during the City Council meeting. So again, that's November 5th. So keep your eyes open for more details on that. And just, I wanted to note tonight, we're going to take an item out of order when we, just before we do the board focus on education, we're going to take the old business item A, because we have some people in the room who are here for that, and we don't want to hold them up for the whole meeting. And that concludes the chair's report. We have a report of the students this evening. Ms. Clater from Portland High School.
Hi everyone, my name is Isabel Clater, and I'm the representative from Portland High School. I haven't done a report in months, but I just wanted to give an update on where Portland High School is right now. We're in the midst of Spirit Week, so all week we've had grade-by-grade programs and activities designed to bring classes together. So our freshmen did some team building, and seniors have had a lot of time to kind of bond together as the new senior class. And then we've also had themed days each day of the week to bring the entire school together. I think I still have glitter on from costume day today, but it's been a really, really fun week. And I think in the process of choosing the spirit days and organizing the bonding activities, we really wanted to address we wanted to make the week as inclusive as possible and as positive as possible, so we've been working to make sure our freshmen feel welcome and to make sure that everyone, no matter their background, has the ability to participate in all of these activities and to really feel part of the school. And I think we've done a really good job of that. We also, looking forward to later this week, were chosen as the National School Rivalry of the Week for Max Preps, which is a national sports magazine. So our homecoming and pep rally will be covered by them, which is, I think, really, really exciting for a lot of our students. We'll be playing against SOPO in the Battle of the Bridge to decide which city has to plow the bridge over this winter. So you can come support us this Friday. Also, some students and teachers alike were having issues with our new homeroom system this year. So we had some committee work. I was given the privilege of being able to sit in on the committee of adults to talk about how we can make a better system and be more accountable for where our students are and how they're getting their work done during this 40-minute block of time that we use as advisory. So we worked with a teacher over at Deering High School who developed a program for Deering, and we developed a very similar program that we've now been using over the past week or so. I think it's worked a lot better from my perspective, and I think teachers are finding that it's much easier to know where their students are, which is obviously a priority. Student Council has started to organize the freshman elections process to decide who our new student councilors are going to be from the freshman class, and we're really excited and looking forward to seeing who those students will be. And then last week, our sophomores and juniors took the PSATs, so I think it's probably good to have that off their shoulders now, and seniors engaged in some workshops surrounding financial aid and financial planning for the future for college, and then working on some writing workshops about writing their college essays. And then finally, I wanted to personally express my excitement about the board's approval to send myself and the other school board reps to Philadelphia in March for the school board conference. I'm really looking forward to continuing our education about education, and I think it'll be a good learning experience and will help make sure that we stay connected with our community and with school boards in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Claytor. Report of the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Ms. Claytor, even though you had not reported in a long time, you had not lost your groove. So it's always hard to follow the student reps. Good evening. I would like to begin tonight by extending heartfelt condolences from the Portland Public Schools family to the family of Deering Principal Greg Palmer. Mr. Palmer's father passed away a week ago. Also last week, Al Hodder, a longtime Portland High School volunteer, passed away, and we extend our condolences to all those who knew and benefited from Mr. Al's support over the years, as well as to his loved ones. Yesterday, we participated in a City Council workshop to update the Council on the work of the Enrollment and Facility Study. We also hosted the 5th in our series of 11 community sessions on this topic, as was reported by Chair Trevorrow. The workshop and the sessions have been extremely helpful to gain community insights into the work ahead, and there is clearly a lot of work that will be ahead. So I want to remind community members that we have an input survey that is still out there for the Enrollment and Facility Study, and that will remain open through October 30th, and we encourage everybody to take the time to share their thoughts as we begin this important work. Also, yesterday, we submitted our October 1st enrollment count to the Maine Department of Education. Our enrollment is slightly up from last year, 6,749 students compared to 6,726 last year on the same date. This Wednesday, so tomorrow, we will host a screening of the documentary Dawnland, which chronicles the quest for justice for Maine's native inhabitants, and the event starts at 5:30 right across the street here in the Portland High School auditorium, and so we encourage everyone to join us for that important event. I also want to mention that the 107th, that's hard to even fathom, renewal of the traditional Turkey Day football game between Deering and Portland High Schools. I was there for the first, will take place again this year. We're introducing a wrinkle in the tradition. This year, Deering will be hosting the game at the refurbished Memorial Field. And our plan going forward is to have this rotate from year to year with the home team being the host. So I hope you will all join us for this holiday tradition on Thursday, November 22nd for a 10:30 a.m. kickoff. Tickets are $5 for adult and $2 for students, seniors, and military personnel. On November 6th, Portland residents will be asked to approve Local Question 1 on the ballot. It asks voters to support the establishment of the Greater Sebago Education Alliance. I know that the board will recall that in the spring, you approved entering into an interlocal agreement with 11 districts in the region. The referendum question is the next and final step in this process to establish a regional service center. In order to establish the center, voters in each participating community will be going to the polls to approve a ballot measure because the statute requires this before we can get the financial incentives through the funding formula. As the board will recall, the district stood to lose almost $100,000 in system administration funding from the state if we did not join the RSC. By joining, we not only do not lose that funding, but we're also able to access additional resources. PPS is participating in two components of the GSEA programming. That's a food service purchasing co-op, and in regional professional development is part of the GSEA membership. So I urge our community to come out to vote on the many important issues on the ballot, including this one. In closing, I would like to congratulate Casco Bay's teacher, Mallory Haar, who has received 2 prestigious awards in the past couple of months. Mallory has been selected as an O'Toole Award winner by the Nellie Mae Foundation, and she also received the Educator for the Common Good Award from Bowdoin College. Ms. Haar will be recognized for the latter at an event this Thursday, and she will receive the O'Toole Award in early November. We intend to formally recognize Mallory at a board meeting after all of those events, and Mallory is clearly an amazing educator who is representative of the amazing educators in our school district. And now, final, I would like to welcome our visitors this afternoon. We have seniors from the University of New England here with Professor Lane Clark. This is part of their senior class in citizenship and in community engagement, and so I told them that this is going to be a riveting board meeting from beginning to end, because they always are. So you guys picked a great one, and thank you. And it's great to see young people engaged in the community, learning about how to stay engaged as you move on into your professional lives. So thank you for being here, and thank you, Professor Clark. And Professor Clark is also a parent of Longfellow students, so thank you for being here. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Report of the Secretary. Consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of September 25th, 2018. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. Are there any questions on the 9:25 minutes? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the minutes? Seeing none, any board discussion? Ms. Thompson?
Just a couple friendly typing amendments. On 5, under report of the superintendent, on letter B, just adding an E to resources after human resources. And then on the second page, under other committees and/or member concerns, the second to last bullet, Friday at 6 p.m. in Augusta instead of August. And then on the third page, my question to the superintendent was, under personnel, it says administrative acknowledgement, and it says Mr. Mustafa Rodampour is the new Chief Information Technology Director, but then you go to the notes of October 2nd, and he changed his name to Executive Director of Data and Technology. So I'm just wondering.
It's the latter.
It's the latter, okay. So if we can change it in the notes there. And those are my amendments for that one, and I have some on the next one. But
Okay. Okay. So we'll accept those as friendly amendments. Any other discussion on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of September 25th, 2018 with those amendments, please indicate. It is unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of October 2nd, 2018. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, seconded by Ms. Morioni. Are there any questions on these minutes? Seeing none, is there any public comment on these minutes? Seeing none, any board discussion? Ms. Thompson?
again, just a couple friendly typos. Under report of the superintendent's remarks, fourth bullet down, it says the district will host a session, and then the letter N is there, and I think it's supposed to say on teens and vaping. And then the position, obviously, for Mr. Mustafa Rodampour. Thank you. That's the correct position title there. And then on the last page, under adjournment, motion and voted, Ms. Thompson moved, Mr. Rodriguez seconded, and it was voted unanimously of all those present, just missing the E on present.
Any other comments on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of October 2nd, 2018 with those amendments, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of October 9th, 2018. Is there a motion? Mr. Rodriguez, seconded by Mr. Balfons. Are there any questions on these minutes? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the October 9th minutes? Seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of October 9th, 2018, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Okay. We have report of the committees this evening. Curriculum and Educational Planning, Ms. Morioni.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just need to report that the next curriculum meeting is Tuesday, October 30th at 6 p.m. at the district office. Thank you.
Thank you. Operations. Yeah. Mr. Rodriguez?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Chair. So Operations Committee has not met since the last time I reported. We're scheduled to meet on Tuesday, October 30th at 6 p.m. at Central Office, and we're going to continue working on the list for the projects on the 2020 CIP request from the schools to the city's general fund. So again, October 30th, 6 p.m. at Central Office. I guess, can I go ahead and report just the next appointment or the next meeting for BFF?
Sure.
Yep. So also just to let folks know that the next meeting for the Buildings for Our Futures District Advisory Building Committee is scheduled for October 22nd, Monday, October 22nd at 5:30 over at Central Offices as well. And Superintendent Botana will share a little bit about what we're looking to accomplish at that meeting.
Thank you. Ms. Seeliger is not here for Policy and Legislative Affairs. Is there any?
The committee has not met this month, and I don't believe, I need to talk to Ms. Seeliger. We do not have a meeting scheduled right now.
Okay. And, I skipped over Finance and Personnel. Ms. Vendel is not here this evening. Alicia? Ms. Gardner?
So we are meeting next week, October 23rd at Central Office at 6 p.m. We're going to start to discuss the FY20 budget, just very high-level discussion around personnel. I believe we plan to discuss our current tuition reimbursement process, and I'm working with Jenna to talk if we want to have a discussion on TIFs as well. So that's next Tuesday at 6 o'clock at Central Office.
Thank you. Are there any other committee and/or member concerns?
I would just, as Board Member Rodriguez mentioned, there is work that's happening in addition to the Buildings for Our Future Advisory Building Committee. We are in the process of planning for the renovation of Lyseth Elementary School, as many people know already. And so city residents that are interested in becoming members of the Lyseth Building Level Advisory Committee to provide advice on this project will be given the opportunity shortly to complete an application form. Just to recap, the board's governance authorization around this is that in the Building Level Advisory Committee, we will give priority to Lyseth staff, parents, and elected officials who live in the Lyseth attendance area. And members of the Building Level Advisory Committee will advise on Lyseth school construction issues such as traffic flow around the building, location of key features, color selections, art features, etc. And it's envisioned that the committee will also serve to communicate with larger constituencies about the progress and details of the project. The BLAC is an advisory committee that will provide feedback and suggestions to the larger district advisory building committee, and of course the board retains decision-making responsibility on all aspects of the Buildings for Our Future construction. So as I mentioned, there will be a form coming out. I think a press release is scheduled to come out tomorrow with this information. So we urge anyone who is interested in serving at that level in the Lyseth construction project to take the opportunity to fill out the application.
Thank you. Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent. Just real quick, the application is up on the website already. and on Facebook through social media. So we'll be able to access that, and that literally
Ms.
happened
Valenzuela moves very fast.
as you were speaking. A couple other things. I just wanted to echo what Chair mentioned about the neighborhood meeting yesterday at Presumpscot Elementary. I was able to attend the forum there. It was, so far I understand, is where we've had the best attendance of these meetings. So I wanted to also thank all the parents, community members, teachers, and staff that were part of it. It's great to be part of a district where environments that are conducive to that level of engagement are taking place. But I do recognize that the nature of the meetings are very challenging, just to say the least. So again, I just wanted to thank everybody that came out last night. I also wanted to say I had a chance, this is actually somewhat important in my view. I had a chance to go to a parent university event this week rather. When was it? Last week, sorry. Where they discussed teens and vaping. Thank you. It's a topic that a lot of parents and teachers have been asking to hear more about. It's certainly something that I did not appreciate the level of just how bad things are as far as how popular vaping is with young students. So clearly there's a lot of work to be done as far as advocacy and education. Health consequences to vaping are just serious issues that we all should be better educated about. And it's alarming the amount of money that companies are using to market these products towards young people, and the way that they're targeting young people. I mean, the flavors that they have for these things, and some of the advertising in magazines. It's alarming, like I said. So again, really thankful for what the district put together, and the city of Portland helped with the presentation. I believe it was the Department of Health in the city of Portland that presented. That event was videotaped, so you can access it through the Portland Public Schools YouTube channel. And again, I encourage everybody to just log in and continue to get informed on that issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other reports, Mr. Atkinson?
I just wanted to also chime in on the community forums that we've been having around the facilities and capacity review. There's been some misinformation, and I know that board members received an email earlier today. People seem to be under the impression that there is a plan to close Presumpscot Elementary School. I want to be very clear. There is no plan to close Presumpscot Elementary School or any other school. We are looking comprehensively at all of our facilities, and we're going to be taking some action to put together a commission to begin to look at that work tonight. So no decisions have been made. No schools have been have bubbled up as suggestions yet. We are in the very, very early phases of that project, and so I'm very happy. As Board Member Rodriguez just stated that there's such enthusiasm and engagement from the Presumpscot community, and I'm glad that they are there and advocating for their school. But I just want to make it clear to everyone that there have been no decisions, and that Presumpscot is not, as someone said last night, on the chopping block.
Thank you. Any other reports? Seeing none, we'll move into consent items. Would the superintendent read the statement of consent?
Yes, Madam Chair. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district. As required by that policy, all of the donations are listed in the board memo accompanying this item, and as has been the practice, each donor will receive a written contribution acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank the many generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value and historical or commemorative significance. The contributors are listed in the board agenda materials by name and donation, and we are incredibly grateful for their support of our work.
Thank you. And so Ms. Morioni.
I just would like to say, it's just my own thoughts around that. I really liked it when we announced what was being contributed to our schools. I know it takes us some time out of our meeting, but I'd love for the chair and for our superintendent to go back and reconsider adding for the superintendent to list out or say publicly what all those consent items were for the public to hear, because I think, again, any contribution at all to our schools right now is so extremely valued, and to be able to say it publicly what they are, I think would be great. So just to mention that. Thank you.
Okay. I'm seeing nods around the table, so we can take that feedback. Thank you. So I noted at the beginning of the meeting that I'd like to take the old business item out of order. We do have a pretty comprehensive board focus on education this evening, so right now we'll do old business item A, consideration and action to approve the appointments committee recommended Enrollment and Capacity Commission membership. Is there a motion? Mr. Rodriguez, seconded by Ms. Morioni. And with the superintendent or Ms. Thompson?
Yeah, I'm going to start, and then I think Ms. Thompson's going to finish it off. During the 2019 budget process, it became apparent that changes in the state funding formula and the increased valuation for Portland would likely lead to ongoing reductions in state funding for Portland Public Schools for the foreseeable future. As part of the board's commitment to the Portland City Council and community in that budget process, the board committed the district to review all aspects of the district's current enrollment and capacity to determine if there are efficiencies that can be implemented to reduce the overall cost of education. To that end, the board adopted a resolution on May 15th of 2018, and that resolution called for the superintendent to present a plan for executing a comprehension facilities and capacity analysis over the course of the 2018-19 school year. Over the course of the fall, staff and board have worked to take steps towards executing on that resolution. On September 25th, the board authorized me to enter into contract with a consultant to assist in the enrollment and facility study. On that same day, the board directed the appointments committee to review applicants to serve on a commission to oversee the staff and consultants' work and review the resulting data to make recommendations to the board in January of 2019. The board agreed that the composition of the commission would include 2 board members, 2 city councilors, 6 community members, and 5 staff, 2 principals, 2 teachers, and an educational technician. Staff were to be appointed based on recommendations made by the respective professional association leadership, and the remaining 10 members were to be selected by the board's appointment committee. The board directed staff to put out a survey to encourage members of the community to apply to serve on the commission. The survey was published in mid-September and was active through October 1st. The survey was advertised on the district website and social media, in the Press Herald, and through individual networks. The board's appointment committee, chaired by board member Sarah Thompson, along with member Marnie Morioni and member Mark Balfons, met to review the list of applicants. The committee used a name-blind process so as to reduce bias based on their knowledge of applicants, and the committee selected 6 community members and an alternate based on this review. The community selections are listed in the board's packet, and I believe Ms. Thompson is going to speak to those in a minute. 2 city councilors submitted responses to Chair Thompson's request for volunteers. Councilor, you're going to go over that? Okay, I'm going to turn this over. Well, just let me say, the board met in a special meeting on Tuesday, October 9th for a workshop and a first reading on the appointments, as well as to hear any feedback from the community on that. So today is the second reading and the formal action, and I'm going to turn it over to Appointments Chair, Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Superintendent Botana. Just so the chair is aware, there will be 2 amendments being put forward with regards to the commission. And the first amendment, just to let you know, will be to request the board include a member of our base union leadership. And should that be approved by the board, then we have an actual appointment of a person from base to be appointed. But as the superintendent alluded to and spoke of, the Appointments Committee met on a blind process, didn't have the names associated with the answers to the questions. The two questions that were put out for people to answer were, please explain why you want to be a part of the commission, and then please list specific areas of expertise that you bring to the commission's work. We had 16 applicants, and they were all great answers, and it was really hard to choose, to be honest with you. The three of us had some unanimous, and the other ones we discussed, and then we came up with our 6 community members, and most of them are present this evening, and I'll read off their names in just a little snippet of who they are. And after we vote, should they all get approved, then I would ask each of them to stand up when I announce their name, if they don't mind. First and foremost, as the Superintendent Botana said, City Councilor Kim Cook and Pius Ali are the appointment recommendation. School Board, Marnie Morioni and myself. The PAA, Sheila Jebson of Portland High School and Caitlin LeClaire of King Middle School. And then for the PEA, Sue Olafson and Kevin Brewster. And I don't know if we've had yet.
We do not
still
yet
do not,
have
okay. We do not have one yet for the Ed Tech, but there is that spot that we will be appointing somebody, and we'll let you know when that comes forward. And then, like I said, the base will be asking for an amendment on that. So the names that we're bringing forward this evening to you, first and foremost, is Mr. Peter Eglinton. Peter is a Portland taxpayer and a parent. He has a student currently at Casco Bay High School and a former student at Portland High School. And Peter has put forth that he cares deeply for the success of Portland schools, and those he wants to represent, including those who do not have students in the schools. And Peter's experience, he comes to us after being board chair on the school board for 3.5 years. And he worked for the district for more than 7 years. And he has a wealth of experience with regards to comprehensive planning. And also, he was our chief operations officer for a few years. So he has quite a bit of experience. Mr. Christopher Dana is also a Portland taxpayer. I think everybody's Portland taxpayers, so we probably can skip that part. He's also a parent at Longfellow, and he put his name forth that he currently works for a large local law firm, and he's had some conversations with colleagues at work in regards to Portland Public Schools and how much he has had good experiences there. And he wants to make sure that we maintain an attractive and diverse district. And he had quite a bit of answers, so I appreciate all of his information. He's also, his experience, he's a corporate transactional attorney and has substantial experience helping companies navigate and structure financings and reorganizations, which he felt was highly relevant, and so did we to the commission. Mr. Benjamin Grant, also a parent and Ocean Avenue Elementary School, and he is a current member of the Ocean Avenue PTO for the last 4 years, including 2 years as the PTO president, and he's also I don't know the exact title, but he brought together all of the PTOs across the city to help the board this past budget season in letting us know what was important to the various schools and their PTOs and families. And his experience, he talks about the school budget process and budget challenges, and that he's skills are bridge building skills and good negotiating, and he's a labor lawyer by trade. We have Ms. Cheryl Crowley, who is a resident of Cliff Island, and she is also a parent and Portland Public Schools staff member. She has students at Casco Bay High School and Cliff School. And she's had the pleasure of experiencing her children's success in our schools, as well as an island school. And she hopes to represent and advocate for schools and remaining part of the greater school community of the islands. Before starting her family, she was a special education teacher in Maine and moved to Cliff Island, where she was an ed tech at one time, and she's an active member of the parent-teacher committee and the island's substitute teacher at times in the past, and all 3 of her children have grown up through the island school, so on and so forth. And then Mr. David Brenneman is also a Portland taxpayer, but currently a parent without former children, former city councilor. He has a lot of experience. He was a state legislator, a mayor, past member of the city schools 4x4 task force, which was, again, facility related. It was to study elementary school renovations. And he is a parent of a child who attended Portland schools. And he is also, like myself, a graduate of Portland Public Schools. And he's had a lot of experience in the community and working in public service. His experience, he felt that he brought, was common sense, understanding of, and expertise in governmental and committee processes, and the ability to work with others and bring people of various voices and views together. And again, he worked on the school renovation committee and chaired and ran the referendum campaign that resulted in a 2-to-1 margin of victory by the voters for the 4 schools. And yeah, he's got quite a wealth of experience as well. And then last but not least is Nicole Breeding. And she is a Portland Public School parent. I have a Longfellow student, and she's also the PTO chair at Longfellow. She's been an educator for over 20 years and a parent of 2 young boys, and she wants to be involved, obviously, for the future of Portland Public Schools, not just for her children, but for all. And she's lived all over the country and the world and has knowledge about all types of education in schools. And she also felt that she understands the importance of diversity and equity within our schools. And she's a homeowner as well on Peaks Island. So that is our slate in front of you this evening. So 6 community members, 2 city councilors, 2 school board members, 2 PAA, 2 PEA, and soon to be appointed Ed Tech.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Any board discussion? Ms. Thompson.
Would this be the appropriate time to ask for an amendment?
It would.
Okay. So I would like to amend for the board's approval to include a member of our base union membership.
Okay. Is there a second? Ms. Morioni, would you like to speak to your motion?
Certainly. Which I wish we had thought about it because we have all of the other unions, and we certainly did not by any means mean to overlook BASE in any way. But we're thankful to the president of BASE bringing it to our attention and asking for inclusion, and certainly we want them to be a part of the commission. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the amendment? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on the amendment? Seeing none, any board discussion on the amendment? Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to thank Ms. Thompson for responding to the request to have a base employee present at the commission. What a valuable input base employees could present to this line of work. Base unit is pretty broad. It covers our food services, transportation, crossing guards. I'm sure I'm going to forget who, janitors, secretaries. So again, people that are deep in the weeds of the works of the district, so having their input in this work is critical. So again, thank you for responding to the request from the base president. Thank you.
Mr. Atkinson.
I just want to concur. I think especially when we're considering food service and considering transportation as part of this, having someone representing the base unit makes a whole lot of sense. Thanks.
Any other discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on the amendment to add a base unit member to the commission. All those in favor? It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. Now I'll go forward with the second amendment to add to the list of commission members that I read earlier. We have a submission of Mr. Mark Hubbard, who is the administrative assistant at King Middle School. He's been put forth by his base unionship.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the amendment? Oh, I'm sorry, it needs a second. Mr. Rodriguez. Are there any questions on the amendment? Seeing none, any public comment on the amendment? Seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. And we're back to the main motion. Is there any further board discussion? Ms. Uri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure whether this is the right time to bring this up, but I am very interested in bringing more student voice into the enrollment and facilities work. And I don't know whether this could be in the capacity that I am here, but just involving them in any sort of way, because I think that students are really integral to the budget process and could provide a lot of really important accountability to the board and to the public. And I think that they would be a really great asset. So if I could have any sort of involvement with that work at all, I think that would be a really great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Atkinson.
This was something that we discussed at one point in the process, and I'm not sure where a student representative sort of fell off of the commission. But I would be happy to propose an amendment to add a student representative to the commission, unless there's some good reason why that would not be appropriate. So I guess I'll offer an amendment to add a student representative to this commission at this time.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Balfonts. And would you like to speak any further to your amendment?
I think that our student representatives on the board, speak for themselves. Their contributions are invaluable to our work and will be to the commissions as well. So I don't know that there's too much more that needs to be said.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Yep. So, Ms. Uri, were you volunteering to be that student, or are you volunteering to help find a student? I think, obviously, trying to get that locked down at this point is important.
Yeah, definitely. So I, of course, would love to be a part of this. However, a big part of my work, as you all know, I'm working on a pretty long school project on school funding, and I think that having more significant student voice rather than just me, and I have my own opinions, but I'd love to bring in more diversity from other parts of the school. So I'm not sure whether having just one sole student rep would be a good idea, or just having an advisory group in a different capacity. But I think just bringing in a larger group from more schools and different parts of the system would be great.
Ms. Claytor?
For the sake of time, I think it would probably be best if you ended up being that student rep, and then if you work to get other student voice, I think you would do an amazing job of connecting with other students. You always do, and I know you understand finances way better than I do, so you're obviously the better out of the two of us. But I think in terms of making sure that this committee kind of gets on its feet and gets started, I think it would probably be better if we just decide to stick with you instead of trying to hunt for someone else who'd be interested.
Is that something you would accept, Ms. Uri?
Yeah, I would, of course, love to be on this board as a first step, and then maybe if we could possibly leave the door open to students being involved in other ways in the future, I think that would be great, even if it's not in the same capacity.
Yes. I'm sure that we can work with staff to include students. These are all public meetings going forward, and your representation will make sure that that happens. Okay. Ms. Thompson?
I have a question, and it's not in opposition or anything, but we also have a third student rep who's not present this evening, so I just think that we should probably put it out to the third one as well and see between the two of them where they are a student at Paths, and they have building programs there and various programs there too. I just think we should put the offer out to the student as well that's not here this evening, and then between the two of you, one of you do it. So I just want to make sure, because they're not here, to include them as well.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Thank you, Chair. Just pointing out, to consider that as the work of the commission moves forward, we will have different student reps on the board. So maybe leaving it open to one of the incoming board student reps to access the commission should they be interested as well. So maybe locking down, maybe have an amendment where we have a space for a student rep without specifically naming Ms. Uri. I don't know if that's even an option.
The only thing to that, Mr. Rodriguez, is, no, that's certainly fine. I don't mind either way. But they'll be coming in, and we're actually reporting back to the board in January, and so that the student members are with us until inauguration, which is in December. So I think to bring a new student rep up to speed, we're going to hopefully start having meetings ASAP because we're already a little bit behind where we want to be. And so we will probably be hitting the ground running with a couple meetings right away and then a couple more. And I think we're going to have probably 6 or 8 meetings between now and January is the plan. So great idea, but I think there'll be plenty of opportunity for them to, depending on what the commission recommends and what the report says, for lots of involvement from many in the community as well as students.
I agree with that. I don't think that we're in a position to switch in the middle of the process. And as Member Thompson indicated, we are scheduled to have 6 meetings with the commission. That's the commitment that we ask people to make, and those are to take place between now and January. So it would be hard for somebody else that we don't even know who that is to come in at this point. So Ms. Uri, you're stuck with us.
So the amendment on the floor currently is simply to add a student rep to the commission. So we can vote on that, and then if we want to keep it open and seek input from our other student rep, then nobody needs to make an amendment. But if anybody wants to solidify who's going to serve in that position tonight, somebody can make an amendment after that. Does that sound okay procedurally? So any other comments on adding the student rep? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of Mr. Atkinson's amendment to add a student rep to the commission, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Okay, we're back to the main motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the Appointments Committee's recommended enrollment and capacity membership, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to, if you're here when I announce your name, if you wouldn't mind just standing up for the board so they can put a face with a name. So Mr. Peter Eglinton, Mr. Christopher Dana, Mr. Benjamin Grant wanted to be here, but he had work commitments, and so he is excited to get started. And Ms. Cheryl Crowley. Okay. And Mr. David Brennerman. And Ms. Nicole Breeding. Great. Thank you very much for all volunteering, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you for being here this evening.
Congratulations, and I also want to express thank you. This is important work, obviously, that we're heading into. It's important for the board, and I think that we're all very... Ms. Thompson.
I apologize. So I did not go over the other union representation that was present as well, so that was my overlooking, so I apologize. Okay. Do you mind if I mention those as well? Thank you, Superintendent. Ms. Sheila Jebson. Wonderful, thank you for being here. And Caitlin LeClaire from King Middle School. Thank you, Ms. LeClaire. And Sue Olafson.
I don't think they're here.
Sue's not here. And Mr. Kevin Brewster. Kevin. And Ms. Morioni to my left, and I'm me. And, and Ms. Cook and Mr. Ali both have committee meetings this evening. So thank you for reminding me about that.
And as I was saying, I think the board was very impressed with the work that the Appointments Committee did in making these selections. So we're proud to have established this commission, and we thank you for your service. All right, moving back into board focus on educational issues, we have a pre-K update. And would the superintendent like to introduce this item?
At some point, yes. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So today, we are coming to you with the next step in the advancement of early childhood, high-quality early childhood education in the city of Portland. As you know, since 2010, the Portland Public Schools has aspired to increase access to high-quality early childhood education. The 2011 District Comprehensive Plan, Mr. Eglinton is exiting, but I believe he was very involved in this work, named the establishment of high-quality early childhood as a priority for the school district. From 2011 to 2016, Portland Public Schools added at least one pre-kindergarten classroom annually. And however, there was never a comprehensive study to understand what the full extent of the need and the full extent of existing capacity in Portland was already. So this commitment to early childhood education was reaffirmed in the Portland Promise, where increased access to high-quality pre-kindergarten was named as a strategy for improving achievement in the district. As you may recall, at the start of the 2017-18 school year, the district, in partnership with ConnectEd's Starting Strong initiative, engaged in a comprehensive study of that question. A report of the findings of that study was provided to the board last spring. At that time, staff explained that the next step in this process was to engage the larger stakeholders from the community in the development of a strategy to increase access to high-quality pre-kindergarten in Portland. Today's presentation will provide a bit of a recap of the data work and report out on the strategy work that was led by Starting Strong this past year. We will then present the options we are balancing as we look to advance the expansion of high-quality pre-kindergarten in Portland. And today we're seeking your perspectives as part of our question and answer discussions on our possible approaches and your commitment to continue down this road. So this latter point bears noting, as this topic is particularly timely in the context of the board's work on the enrollment and facility study. Decisions need to be made as to whether the district wishes to continue this effort at the same time that we are looking for cost efficiencies. Additionally, as will be discussed, continuing to expand pre-kindergarten access will have an impact on the space considerations provided to Davis Demographics as part of the study. So tonight, Assistant Superintendent Malia Natalie, Matt Dubel, the Executive Director of Portland ConnectEd, and I will be taking turns walking you through aspects of this important next step. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Malia.
Okay, thank you. Hello. Make sure I know how to, there we go. Okay, so our goal tonight is to update you all in the community on the progress we've made related to building out the strategy for pursuing our vision of universal access to pre-K. And like the superintendent just mentioned, we're also hoping that we're going to tee up some decision points for you all. The first of which is connected to whether or not we want to continue to pursue these plans, and if so, which path we want to take to get there. A bit of context, you've seen this in past updates, but just again to situate us, like the superintendent just mentioned, we see this as connected to the achievement goal. If you guys remember, all Portland Public Schools will be prepared and empowered to pursue a productive post-secondary path. One of our first metrics is noted there. We're focused on students coming to school increasingly ready to learn. And connected to that is that we'd like to increase the percent of students entering kindergarten who've been enrolled in high-quality pre-K programs. We're also just noting that one of the achievement strategies that's part of the Portland Promise speaks to developing an intervention strategy where we're focusing in part on extending learning time for students who need it. So we think about this, you can extend the day, extend the year. This is extending the number of years that are helping students get quality learning. And then last year we talked with you all about the fact that we were doing this work in partnership with Starting Strong to really refine the target and the strategy we were going to take to realize this broader citywide vision. So that work took place over last year up until today, and here we are giving you all an update on where we've landed. Before y'all have seen this before as well, and so I do think it's important that we just keep coming back to the why, both for you and for the community, as to why is this something we would prioritize, and why do we see this as a potentially really high impact strategy connected to our goals around achievement and equity. Here you see one example from the research, but there's quite a bit that speaks to the fact that early childhood education can produce up to a 13% return on investment every year in an individual's lifetime. Goes on to talk about how the benefits are particularly significant for children growing up in poverty. So again, that's why we see this very connected to both achievement and equity as well. A reminder about the specific steps we've taken that is leading us to some of the updates we have tonight. So if you recall, we did that tiered data analysis project in partnership with the USM Data Innovation Project. That then led to a strategy development process that Matt's going to speak to, that was led by Starting Strong and supported by an organization called the School Readiness Consulting Group. And then finally, that was leading us toward Portland Public Schools' action plan for where do we go from here. So Matt DeBell is going to come up. He's the Executive Director of Connect Ed, as you know. And just quickly, he's going to share with you all the findings from the data analysis and the strategy work. So specifically, we'll talk through the number and percent of students that are able to access quality pre-K today, and what that means about who's not accessing. He'll speak to the key barriers that we were able to unearth through that data innovation project work. If you guys recall, we've had some trouble historically with filling all of our seats, especially with students from low-income backgrounds. I think we've talked about this before. We tend to have all of the seats fill up quickly with huge waiting lists for students from more affluent families, and that's not the case on the other side, so we wanted to really understand what's at the root of that. And we talked a little bit about that. We'll reground you in that. And then finally, you'll be introduced to the 12 strategies that we were developed. And from there, the superintendent will come back up and speak about the proposed target for the number of seats we'd want to expand to pursue the vision we've talked about as a city, the 3 possible pathways to get there, and how we might think about revenue. So, Matt, you want to come up?
Good evening. As you probably recall, Starting Strong is a network that links folks who are working on early childhood in the city of Portland, including Portland Public Schools, but also including a lot of the other private and public agencies who serve young kids and their families. I do want to acknowledge we have some leaders in early childhood who are here with us tonight who are important voices within this network. I just want to acknowledge we've got John Schuss from the Sam L. Cohen Foundation, Louise Marsden from Opportunity Alliance, Camelia Babson-Haley from Youth and Family Outreach, and Lori Moses from the Catherine Morel Day Nursery. They've all been an integral part of this planning process, as have many Portland Public Schools staff members. So I want to acknowledge all of that work. And as you're aware, there's been a goal going back now almost a decade to get to universal access for 4-year-olds to attend preschool. We didn't have really great data on how many were attending. And partly it's because it's a complex system. There's a lot of different providers involved. So going back over the past year, the schools with Starting Strong commissioned the Data Innovation Project at USM to take a look at a couple different facets of data to help inform a rigorous planning process. So part of what they did, and this is a recap for folks who remember from the spring report out on these results, but it's a useful springboard to the planning that we did. What Data Innovation Project looked at, among other things, was kindergarten registration forms from last year's cohort, so students who were entering kindergarten last year, where parents were asked to self-report whether and where students attended preschool. And that gave us an interesting read on the overall system. It turns out that 75% of those kindergartners had attended some type of preschool program. And if you look at the map on the right there on the slide, that's a map of all of the sites that came up. So there were 45 sites in total where 4-year-olds attended. So that's a mix of public and private. Some of the private may be home-based preschool. There might be centers. And certainly there's the public pre-K sites as well as Head Start sites mixed in there. Although 75% of kindergartners attended something, there were disparities, and there were, depending on students' socioeconomic status, ELL status, and also their neighborhood, there were disparities in how much students, at what rate students attended pre-K, and we'll unpack a little bit of that for you. So if we look at obviously, the system overall with all of these different providers is serving most 4-year-olds. But what we want to do is really zoom in on where the gaps are and where the unmet needs are. And that's what this will illustrate some of the things that we took a look at. So starting from the top, one was students who aren't attending a high-quality program, and that's defined as either high quality, meaning you're rated either step 3 or 4, on the state rating scale, or you're a Head Start, or you're a public pre-K classroom. When you look at the students that are not in a high-quality setting, there are 250 who fall into that category. When you look at students who aren't attending any preschool at all, no matter what the quality, there are 133 that fall into that category. And then we looked at students who we know from the national data especially benefit from a preschool experience. So that would be low-income students who are free and reduced lunch eligible, English language learners, students who need special education services, and we looked at what of those students were not receiving a preschool experience, and there were 88 in that grouping. The biggest category there were low-income students, so you'll see if you break out just free and reduced lunch eligible students, there were 79 that fell into that grouping. And then finally, it turned out it was interesting to see by neighborhood, there were several neighborhoods where more than a third of children didn't attend any preschool. And when you look at those neighborhoods, and they were East Deering and Riverton, there were 39 students total in those neighborhoods who didn't have any preschool. And we know part of that has to do, can have to do with income, and part of that can also have to do with location of existing preschool classrooms. Particularly in the case of East Deering, we know that there are just not as many early childhood providers in that neighborhood. So we can also, and this helps get us a little bit better view by neighborhood, because you can look at, since these were taken from kindergarten registrations, we can look at it by the elementary school those kindergartners were enrolling in. And so this is sorted from, at the top are the highest rates of participation in preschool, to the bottom, the lowest. So you can see at the bottom there, Riverton, Presumpscot, both over a third not participating. So this helps frame where we might start to address some barriers and some gaps. I do want to point out, though, that when we start to talk about barriers, we should acknowledge that for some families, not participating in preschool may not be because there's a barrier, it may be family choice. And we know from national data that if you take the highest income earners who presumably have no barriers for their children to participate in preschool, we know that they still don't participate at 100% because some families like children to stay home until they go to kindergarten. And so we know that that's a piece of the picture, but we also know that for many families, there are significant barriers to participating. So the other thing this Data Innovation Project study did was to dig into that and did interviews both with families and with early childhood providers to get a handle on what the biggest barriers seem to be. And these emerged over and over again as the big four. So family scheduling and work conflicts, financial issues and cost, care for other siblings, This can involve, for example, one child being in one location while another child is in a different location, and then location of programs overall in transportation. And these four are often interrelated. So you may have challenges that have to do with scheduling and transportation because you're going back and forth between different sites with different siblings. And we know that overall the cost is a challenge for everyone. And so when we look at these barriers, what we wanted to do is to take a community approach to address these barriers. So over the past 6 months, what we did in Starting Strong was to convene a community approach to creating a strategic plan that addresses these barriers. And we worked with a consulting firm who specializes in early childhood school readiness consulting. With their help, we laid out a process that engaged 22 stakeholder groups or organizations to feed in and plan collaboratively. So this engaged school administrators, teachers, parents, early childhood experts, funders, elected officials. I want to thank all of the Portland Public Schools staff as well as the school committee members who participate in this process. What we ended up with is, there we go. What we ended up with was a set of 12 key strategies that the community can take to address these barriers that stand between 4-year-olds being able to access preschool experiences. And so I'll go quickly through these, and you'll note that some of these have implications for decisions that Portland Public Schools makes. The first is to create a public-private council so that there is a group that can align efforts, since we're talking about a system with many different parts. The second strategy, to expand the number of pre-K seats. We know that we have a gap in the number of seats available and the number of students who need them. It's to, number 3, look at a funding strategy. It's to work on public awareness linked to strengthening pre-K and early learning expansion. And finally, to start a continuous improvement process so that the system overall can make continuous progress toward these goals. These all fall into the comprehensive, what we call the comprehensive systems bucket. So these were the things to help the overall system work better for kids and families. And then we get to a set of strategies that are all about family-centered supports. This is where we really are trying to address some of those barriers that get in the way of families accessing preschool. So it's increasing the availability of extended hours. These are options for before and after care. In addition to school day. It's bringing resources to support the whole family. One of the benefits of taking a community approach is we have organizations who specifically work to support families. By tapping into their resources and expertise, we can really support the whole family through the preschool experience. We want to aim to make enrollment strategies more responsive, more sort of user-friendly for families. We need to support children receiving specialized services, the coordination of that support, particularly as the state decides what's going to happen with CDS. That's going to be an important part of making this all work for families. And finally, to coordinate and expand transportation. The last bucket and the final 2 strategies, this gets to quality programs. We know that many programs are high quality already, but overall, the more programs within that serve students in the city, and this includes those private programs, the higher quality they are, the better, essentially that helps to close the gap of those students who were not in a high quality program. So we always want to keep quality in mind, and the 2 strategies there are to increase professional learning supports and to ensure cultural responsive pedagogy. So the whole idea here is to bring the resources of the community, of the whole community, the infrastructure, the expertise to better serve 4-year-olds. And when it comes to building out the number of seats, that we feel we need, we looked at those gaps in experience based on that data innovation project analysis. And so based on that, the recommendation coming forward is to build out 140 new seats in public preschool. And the outcome here is to aim to provide enough seats that students eligible for free and reduced lunch would all have seats. That population could be completely served. And there would be also a distribution of seats to reflect the district demographic balance. So one of the things we learned is that the best practice recommendations nationally are to avoid creating groups that are classrooms that are entirely high poverty. Even if we want to serve those students, the data suggests that they are best served in settings that are more socioeconomically diverse, so that we've got a mix that looks more like the other classrooms, and indeed even gets toward the district demographic average. And getting to 140 new seats would take adding 2 classrooms per year over year for over the next 5 years. So that's the proposal coming forward for expanding access. I'm going to step aside so that the implications for the district and potential pathways can be examined.
So thank you, Matt. And again, I think this shows that we have been engaged in a very extensive process over the last year. We had made a commitment to come back to the board at the beginning of this school year. We're a little bit past the very beginning of the school year, but still on schedule to actually come back to you with sort of the strategy for how is it that we advance this work. So my job is to walk you through how we're actually proposing to do that. And we have what we're calling 3 different pathways for being able to do this work. And we're going to spend most of our time today talking about number 1 and number 3. Those are the ones that we have fully costed out, because the sort of the middle one is one where it's really the combination. It's a combination of the other 2 approaches. So depending on which way we go, it will cost more or less, so we don't have that fully fleshed out, but you can sort of see in the details of the other 2 what the actual costs would be. So the first option is where we, in essence, move our commitment, which is currently for the classrooms that are currently located in the Portland Public Schools, as well as our partnership classrooms, move responsibility for the oversight, the management of those to a lead agency that would coordinate the management of all of that. The second option is to have us maintain our current classrooms, as well as those 3 partnerships, but also expand by using more of those partnerships. So that's our second option. And then the last one is for us to maintain our classrooms and existing contracts, so those 3 classrooms that are currently located in partner agencies, and expand to this full capacity, the additional 140 slots that Matt talked about through our own means, so in our own schools. So let me talk a little bit about the lead agency approach. There are some key components to it, and as Matt mentioned, Louise Marsden is here representing the Opportunity Alliance, and she's been integrally involved, and we've had these conversations not just with Louise, but with the entire Opportunity Alliance administrative structure, and I will quote them in saying that they are all into their ability to be able to do this, and there are tremendous advantages to that, as you will see as I walk through that. So in this model, the classrooms would all be run by the Opportunity Alliance. One of the sort of key values of this expansion from the district's perspective is to be able to create the relationship with families and the Portland Public Schools earlier in the development of students' academic career. So for us, being able to have these facilities to the extent possible within Portland Public Schools is a high priority. And so when we talk about primarily, it means that if there was not the ability to do it in a Portland Public Schools, it wouldn't be, but otherwise we would move in that direction. And I think if you also reflect back on what are some of the barriers that the parents note are in the way, is the sort of the transportation, having students in multiple locations and so on. And to the extent that we can move as many students into Portland Public Schools facilities, that's a bonus. So another advantage of this approach is the capacity that comes with the relationship with TOA to provide extended day services. So part of the commitment that they're able to make in their programming is to provide the before care and after care programming support as part of the value added for their services, as well as to access wraparound services. So for example, in areas such as health, parent education, things that the Head Start program nationally requires and is built into the programming that the Opportunity Alliance does in its Head Start program, being able to extend that same level of wraparound care to our students through this partnership. And so in essence, leveraging Head Start, so that is obviously leveraging those things that are in the previous bullet, but it's also being able to leverage the resources, the slots that exist under the Opportunity Alliance's Head Start contract that will allow us to provide more of those services at a lower cost by leveraging the resources that they have. So the cost, the way that we're breaking this out, I'm giving you two examples, and then if you sort of look at the fine print down at the very end, there is a more detailed year-by-year expansion. But for today's level of discussion, we didn't think that we needed to get to that. There are, obviously significant conversations that we need to continue to have with the curriculum committee, with the finance committee, as we begin to sort of parse this out. But we wanted to give you sort of the bird's eye view of what it would look like in year one, and then what it would look like when fully executed in year 5. So that's what we're going to walk through today. So this first year with TOA, it assumes no expansion, and so it basically assumes the current cost escalated for that expanded, before care, after care, and sort of the sort of idea here is that it would be our current cost plus the revenue that we currently receive from the DOE for our students. And further in this, I have a slide that will sort of detail the revenue picture for this, and we'll also talk about funding before we end today. So I know that those questions are probably popping up, so that we're going to get to those. So I want you to just sort of focus on how we're getting to this number. So that total budget in year 1 would be $938,864. Not significantly different from what we currently spend on the same services with the value added that I described earlier. Let's move on. Yeah. Very annoying, Malia. So the estimated cost at full, so this is in year 5. This is an estimated pupil cost of $12,937 per pupil. And so in 2023, fully built out, the entire investment for that near universal access, that expanded access that we described, so our current 130 slots plus an additional 140 slots, is $2 million, close to $3 million. So the full cost is $3,000,001, and so that includes the fully built-out program as well as the escalated costs of our 3 partnership classrooms. And did Alicia leave? Or? Okay, so it is I just said the escalated costs, but is that the current cost or is that the escalated cost for the? The 3 is escalated. The 3 is escalated. Okay, so I was right in saying that. Yay me. Okay, so the estimated state subsidy, and we will talk about that in a little bit, would be roughly $311,000. So that would offset that full cost, but we are still, at a significant delta that we're going to talk about between what we currently spend and what that expenditure would be. So the community partners approach, I talked about this briefly as I sort of, and I said I'm not going to go into the details of the costs associated with this, but it's somewhere in between the 2 models depending on how we actually would scale this up. And I think it's important for me to point out that if you sort of look at the costs for those community partner classrooms today, that cost is significantly lower than what our cost is, but that's misleading, and it's important for the board to understand that that is part of the community investment that those partners are making in helping to establish the pre-kindergarten programs in the Portland Public Schools. So what it really means is that they do a significant amount of their own fundraising to be able to support those 3 programs at the current contract cost. So in other words, if we were to scale up, it would be an unrealistic expectation for us to say, we're going to be able to scale up to those additional 140 slots with community partners at the current cost, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of just under $60,000 per classroom for each of those classrooms. I will point this out here which is something that you'll see in depth as we move into the district costs. The district coordination, which we currently don't have any built-in administrative capacity to manage, and we are doing that at at a relatively small number of students. And as we expand those students and we take full responsibility for managing all aspects of it, there obviously is a administrative cost that we will capture in the next slide. And we would still have that cost if we ran through the community partners, and that we would still need some coordination support at the district level to be able to do that. Okay, so let's get into the PPS classroom. So just the model, it's to continue to run the current PPS classrooms and the current community partners. So in this approach, we would still continue to have those 3 classrooms into the future through our existing community partners, but all the 140 additional seats would come out of they would be managed by the district. And I think the sort of the biggest drawback to this is that the costs that you're going to see do not assume the extended day or wraparound services that are envisioned and assumed in the lead agency approach. So again, if you sort of go back and hearken to what people told us were the biggest roadblocks to participation, those roadblocks, one of them is the access to the full day programming and things along those lines, and that would not, we would still be in a place where we would have to figure that out if we were going to truly address the needs that our community has told us that come with this. So how much would it cost? Click, click, click. Year 1, it's important to point out that we, in year one under this model, would be expanding out to a couple additional classrooms. And so the total cost for that would be $898,000 on the district side, and there would be an additional cost of to continue the partnerships at the current level, which is $168,000, and the total, which you cannot see, but you can see it on your slides, is 1.1 million, 1.166 is the total cost for year one of operating the program, which in full transparency would have 2 additional classrooms over what we're proposing to do with TOA, but would be without the wraparound and extended supports that would come with the TOA administration. And then for year 5, you also won't see the bottom line, but for year 5, the cost for running 14 district classrooms and the existing 3 partnership programs, plus adding a cost for district coordination, so this would be the district staff to manage the program, would be an additional $200,000, and so that would bring the total cost to roughly $2.5 million to be able to do that internally. And now I'm going to talk briefly about revenue. What we currently what we currently receive from the state in allocation for pre-kindergarten students is roughly $7,000 per student. As you know, that is subject to what we actually receive from the state versus what we are required to come up with. And as you know, right now we get about 16% of our funding from the state, and the rest is a local responsibility. So when you think of that $7,000, which sounds like a significant amount, in terms of what we actually receive, it's only $1,100, close to $1,200. So when you go back and you look at some of those slides, and we were looking at what the revenue offset was, the revenue offset that we are expecting to receive is not the full $7,000 per student, but actually what we would expect to receive, which is just short of $1,200. And I think it's also important for you to understand, which I know you all do because we've been in this work around what we can expect going forward from the state, that we can expect to see that decrease. So, for next year, for example, we would expect to receive maybe only 15% of our funding from the state in EPS reimbursement, so that $7,000 would become just around $1,000. And so in our assumptions, and so in what you saw earlier, we've used 1,163 as our model because that's our current, and we obviously cannot predict what the state is, but I think it's important for everybody to understand that the revenue that we actually receive from the state is not the full $7,000, but actually a 15-16% of that. Okay, and so this is a slide that tries to bring this all together and show you what the costs are at full scale and what the gap is between what we currently spend and what we will what we can expect to spend going forward. And there is a change to this revenue gap on the PPS side, so when I get to that, I will explain that. The cost per student at full scale is slightly higher in the lead partner model, as you can see, for year one and also for the future. And so that is something that is important to point out. Again, remember this is a a different program with full wraparound services and access to, before and after care. So it has some significant additional values. And then the revenue gap between what we currently spend and what we would be spending for what we laid out for year one is about $100,000 for both of those models. So I want to, be clear that we actually sort of went back at the last minute and looked at this, and it's not accurate to say that our gap for year one would be $980,000. It's more in the neighborhood of $125,000 for us to be able to scale up, as we discussed in our layout of what the district program would be. And so the revenue gap going forward is where you begin to see the additional value added of the TOA as the lead partner. And so there's still a significant revenue gap that will need to be offset in order for us to be able to get to this, to the scale up to 270 slots. And the difference between that is, obviously it's significant, but the other thing that's important to remember is that the lead partner approach includes the extended day and wraparound services, which we would obviously have to figure out how to do those if we were doing it from the district side in order to be able to provide that. So I want to begin the conversation now about the how do you pay for something like this. And if you go back to what was, probably 30 minutes ago when we introduced this topic, we talked about the fact that this is a very timely topic for us because it has very real implications for two important things that are, happening. We are, as we've talked about several times today, involved in the enrollment and facility study as a school district. And the underlying premise for that is there a way for us as a school district to find efficiencies that allow us to reduce our overall cost? And so, this happens in the context of that conversation, and obviously, the adding of classrooms at our schools has very real implications for the specifications as we share our data with our consultants and we talk about how many classrooms we would need in a school. We would have to do that building in the assumptions that we would scale up to those additional 140 slots in our buildings over time. So, obviously one way to do this is to have that be a part of the Portland Public Schools budget. So basically, it would be part of our, our ask from the voters in Portland. That's the way that we've gotten to 130, and so, a decision point will be, is that how we want to scale up? But this slide shows you the different ways in which other communities, other school districts in partnership with their communities have created those programs. And I'm not going to walk through this in detail, but the examples are everything from bonds that are issued. I'm struggling for the word. What are they called? Social impact bonds, as well as dedicated levies, as well as combinations of, local option sales tax, as well as using TIF revenue to be able to pay for some of these costs and things along those lines. So part of, if you go back to what the system pieces are in those 12 recommendations that came out of the work this year, one of those is to develop a funding strategy, and so that is an ongoing conversation that we will need to engage in should we decide to move forward with this increased access. So we're wrapping up here. Where to next? What are the next steps for us? Obviously, the first one is to get feedback from the board, which we will start today in the discussion after this with your questions and comments around our intent to expand access to high-quality pre-kindergarten. Again, as you know, this dates back, for those of you who have been on the board since 2011, you know that this was a part of the 2011 comprehensive plan and has been part of every conversation that you've had as a board over the past few years. We agreed that that was an important next step for the district as part of the Portland Promise, and so this is the next step in that process, is to actually affirm that that's what we're going to do, and then to decide on how to do it. So those different pathways that we laid out today, the lead partner approach, the current programming with the additional with the partners running the scale-up as well as the in-district scale-up programming. Those are decisions that we will need to make over the coming months as we move forward with the budget. So it's important. I will be talking to Chair Chavarro about the timing, the committee assignments, and the places where this conversation continues. But those are the important decision points that the board is going to be asked to take on. And obviously, as I mentioned, when we looked at the ways in which this is done, is to develop the revenue strategy. And that is obviously not something that is just the board's responsibility, but it's also continue this level of engagement that we've had with ConnectEd, with Starting Strong, with our partners, and obviously with the City Council as that moves forward. So I think that's it, and we're anxious to answer questions and hear your comments and thoughts. So,
thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for the presentation. I just had one question. I wanted to get some clarity around the extended day and wraparound services, and I know that current pre-K is a half-day program, so when we say extended day, are we talking about extended to a full day program and then wraparound services being before and after care?
Our current program is not a half-day program. Our pre-kindergarten program is a near full-day program, so this is expanding to before care and after care, as well as continuing the bulk of the day. Yep.
Thank you.
What hours are those?
Out of my league. It's school day, so
School day, okay.
Yeah, that's our current.
And then just a follow-up. This is going to mirror the school calendar, and so there won't be anything during the summer. Just want to make that clear.
Louise, in your model, summer?
So when we talk about full day access, it is full day, full year. And so the wraparound care is literally sort of what a working family would need early in the morning before school starts, what a working family needs at the end of the day, and of course families work all year, so providing care over the summer. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And this is, again, that the value proposition here, where we, as we've talked about each of those models, the idea of the lead partner approach is that it comes with that wraparound and extended care.
Ms. Thompson?
Well, thank you very much for the presentation and for all of the information. It's very helpful. I was just talking to Ms. Morioni, and I know that I brought this up to Superintendent Botana before. I can't remember the year. I think it might have been 2009, 2010, when we gathered 100 some odd community partners at Ocean Gateway. And I think you and I've talked about that was the number one thing from the community at large that they wanted was pre-K. And I'm wondering, there were some very connected people at that event, and I'm almost wondering where we're at this juncture, if it wouldn't, in something, again, I'm not trying to make more work for anybody, but if it wouldn't be a good idea to try to replicate the people that were there that day and let them know from that time to where we are today, because I think that knowing some of those people that were in that group of 100, there are some very well-connected people for funding sources, et cetera, but also I think it's a good community activity in the sense that we talked about it back in, again, I don't remember the year, I think it was 2009 or 10, I can't remember. Wasn't long after I came on the board. And let them know that them participating in that discussion and where we are today, that 9 years later, here's where we want to be, but we're still kind of at that beginning block, but with your help, potentially we could get to. And so I just think that's another way to engage, again, the people that were at that event, to loop back around with those people. And I think we may have great opportunity. They're also connected community-wise to help us get the word out to the community and get the support if we're going to ask for money from Portlanders, or we're going to ask, philanthropy or so on and so forth. That I really think it's important that we tap that original group back and make a full circle, because I think that's one thing we don't do a lot of in the district, prior to your time, of course, is
We don't do it.
is looping back around and letting people know, okay, your input that many years ago, now here's where we are, because people don't feel as though we do that. So I just wanted to bring that up, because I was blown away at that event. It was really, really moving and really substantial, I think, for this community. So.
Thank you. I think that's a great suggestion. As you saw, one of our next steps is really thinking about the funding strategy, and I think that that's an excellent example of how we can go about building the consensus in the community. I think that, Starting Strong has done a terrific job of engaging partners, but if there are people that have not been a part of this conversation that need to be a part of the conversation, that are committed to this conversation, I think that that's a great example of how we can engage them in that dialogue going forward. And you're very generous, but we don't do a great job of circling back with people now either. So that is obviously something that we strive to get better at. So.
Ms. Morioni.
First, I want to say a huge thank you to all of the people that have worked on this. I mean, this is my 10th year on the board. We've talked about it every year. It's been a priority in my mind every year. So thank you, Superintendent. Thank you to your staff. And most importantly, thank you to all of the stakeholders that have put this work together. I've been waiting anxiously to hear this information. What are we doing? What are we doing? And this is really helpful. I have just a couple questions, and it's regarding the slide that has 45 sites, and of that, I'm wondering how many are the Opportunity Alliance? How many does the Opportunity Alliance already have in the district of the 45 sites? If you don't have it, that's okay. Just curious. I guess the reason why I'm asking that question too is when we think of partners, I don't know how much, and maybe someone can speak to this, how much we've reached out also to those caregivers, the preschool programs that already exist, and see how many. I mean, we're talking about a partnership with the Opportunity Alliance, but I'm curious about what about additional partners that may be part of it. Are we making a decision today just to move forward with just one partner of the Opportunity Alliance without the broad scope of potentially other partners?
So Matt can talk a little bit to the research we did on the capacity through other partners, but just as a reminder, we're looking at 3 possible pathways. And so the notion that we would expand classrooms through community partners is one option here. I also think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Louise, that the Opportunity Alliance, that strategy, they would be the lead agency, but there would still be room within that strategy to expand some of the classrooms through community partners as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and as far as the stakeholder outreach during the planning process, We reached out generally to the early childhood provider community in Portland, and in a very targeted way to those private providers that are rated step 4 on the quality rating scale, because those are the accredited providers who are also eligible to partner with a public school district and receive pass-through funds through that state subsidy. So in addition to, that includes folks who are here today and some other step 4 rated providers who are not currently partnering with the district, but in this process both engaged and indicated they were interested. So I think the universe of potential partners has expanded.
That's great. So on that note, I do really like the partnership idea. I really do, because I think, again, we're talking about dedicated expertise that we would have to then train and staff, and the professional development alone around all of that, to me, is a lot. So I really do like this idea that it becomes a partnership. I think the more that we can work collectively within our district makes just a lot of sense. So on the other question I had on the next slide, when you were going over the estimated unserved students, and then I tallied that up, and that came to 589 total. Is that also because in each one of those columns, they could potentially be the same student?
Yes, there are duplications in that list.
Okay, this was just double checking. And then going to, okay, and then so Superintendent, are you asking us tonight which one of these we prefer right now?
I am saying that those are the kinds of decisions that we're going to be facing. I need to talk to Chair Terraro. We need to figure out what the committee and decision-making process looks like. I am anxious to hear your thoughts, as we already are, about the different approaches, but we are not, this is a focus on educational issues. It's really meant to be more of a workshop, an opportunity for you to ask questions and begin to digest, which we understand is a huge amount of information that we've shared with you today, so no decisions.
Okay.
We're beginning a process.
Well, I'll just leave it at that, in that I do concur with Ms. Thompson about not only the idea of considering all potential partners under the Opportunity Alliance being our lead agency. That makes sense too to me. But then going back to some of those initial stakeholders that were very vocal around wanting to be supportive of this, they could help bolster our messaging out even to the community of this and the need. But most importantly, I just want to say a huge thank you. This is really important to me, and I think I look forward to us moving this along. And thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. I was able to attend a couple of the focus groups that took place with the stakeholders, and for me it was very enlightening to learn of the challenges that present themselves to providing universal pre-K in the district. And I think it reinforced that the decision to, and I remember specifically the words that Superintendent Botana used, to press pause on the automatic addition of pre-K classes in the district so that we can actually focus on doing the high-quality programming. So, like I said, understanding the challenges was, for me, was incredibly enlightening. And one of the things that came up during those discussions that I was hoping we could speak of was the concern from some of the smaller providers, smaller by capacity, because I'm using that word lightly, or anyways, the concerns for them to be having a negative effect to their business as we, quote unquote, take spots away from them. And I'm referring to the ones that would not partner. And I'm probably asking the question not fully understanding how they would be affected, so I was wondering if someone could speak on that.
Lori Moses at Catherine Morel Day Nursery. It is an issue, and so, every year we do lose children to public pre-K. I think being part of the process helps, but it is a concern to programs that aren't step 4, that they're going to lose children. And the other thing that I say at every opportunity is when we lose our preschoolers, when we run infant and toddler programs, the preschool programs help to fund that. So the more 4-year-olds we lose, the less capacity we have to serve the infants and toddlers. But again, I think it's the whole system, and I think that public pre-K and expansion with community partners in partnership with the schools is a great thing. But it is a real issue, and there are programs not only in Portland and not only in Maine that have closed because of loss of children to public pre-K. And the biggest issue for parents, because in our program we serve families who are low income, ELL, and we also serve average families and higher income families. And the issue is, which isn't what you're addressing, but the cost of childcare is so expensive that people will make a choice to go to public pre-K, even if they have to stand on their heads to figure out how to do a part-day program because of the cost. So it just kind of exasperates the whole issue. But I don't know the solution to that. It is real. It is real.
Thank you. I guess the other thought that I had the other question that I had was maybe a real brief explanation of what that level 4 means and what it requires for those smaller ones. But I'm going to say something, just really assumptions here. A level 3 would be the one before you get to a level 4. So what does it require to get a level 4? Just so that we get an understanding of how challenging it is for these.
Sure. The Maine's quality rating and improvement system has 4 levels. So 4 is the top. And the biggest difference between step 3 and step 4 is national accreditation, meeting best practice standards. There are 8 standards within the quality rating system that have to do from administration to staff support and benefits to curriculum to family engagement and assessment and those kind of things. So that if there's a step 4 program, that we have to demonstrate that we meet those things. And some programs can't afford accreditation, so they might do almost everything but the actual accreditation. And that's why we talk about step 3 they could be great programs. It's an expense. But the state requires for a partnership to be step 4. So that's out of our hands.
Thank you again.
Ms. Uri?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Going off on what we've heard from Roberto, I brought this up last year when we discussed this. But as you guys know, I used to work at the popcorn store, and there my boss actually lost her job in Boothbay Harbor due to public pre-K. She was working in a private and high quality preschool, but she lost her job and ended up moving into retail. So I'm just wondering if there's any way for maybe, if we go with the lead agency approach, for them to engage these people who are going to be experiencing some changes automatically, even if it's year 5, year 6. And then also, looking at revenue, we are likely to, local contribution is likely to increase. And I was wondering, with this starting to roll out, what are going to be the budget implications in the coming years, seeing as state subsidy is not on the rise? So are there other things that are going to have to give for this program? And that's just something to keep in the back of our minds.
Those are great points, and just a couple things from both of us. I think, I mean, like Lori said, this is a real issue, the businesses, and I think part of the idea of community partners being in the mix is both about getting a really high-quality system for our families and students, but also thinking about our providers within the community. I do just want to remind us that the target for expansion that we've set is considering people who are not currently accessing. So it's not to say that by expanding it, it won't create those challenges, which I know Lori just spoke to clearly, but this is, the new seats are seats that are not repurposed. It's to create seats for people who, from our data, are not currently accessing pre-K. And then, did you want to speak to the revenue?
Very briefly on the revenue, so we talked during the presentation a little bit about what we're projecting we would get from EPS, and so we're being very realistic about the fact that that's not that much. And so we also talk about the fact that there is the need to come up with a funding strategy in order to be able to do this. And we do have more detail. That's fine print, I'm sure, in yours, because you have the two per slide, but we do have a more detailed accounting of the actual costs over time, sort of year by year, what it would look like to scale up and what the gaps would be in those individual years. So I think that that is absolutely the conversation that the board needs to engage in, in the context of everything else that we are talking about. But, I do want to point out, I think, as Malia said, that these are added slots in a critical area that the board has identified as a priority for a long period of time. And when we talk about equity as a district, this is, one of the strategies that across the country communities undertake as an effort to be able to ensure that, that we meet that first piece of our Portland Promise, which is increase the number of kids who are walking into kindergarten ready to learn. And so I think that, we have to that's why we spent a lot of time up front, even though I know you know this, on the why we're doing this, is because we know that this is a high value proposition from an equity perspective. It's also, as Board Member Thompson mentioned, something that this community universally believed was an important thing to do all the way back to 2009, 2010, when they began what became the first comprehensive plan. So,
Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Just one other question. On the slide that Ms. Morini asked about, the one with the how many Portland 4-year-olds attend preschool, does the number, the 75% that we captured, because does that include K students who came from elsewhere? Because I appreciate the map being there, but I'm assuming that 75 also includes maybe people that came from Florida.
Yeah, so there's actually a total of, I think it was 62 preschools that students had attended because there were students who transferred in to, when they were enrolling for kindergarten. So what we pulled out here, so the 75% reflects the students who went anywhere, even if they weren't in Portland when they were 4 years old. What we pulled out to map were the sites in Portland that students attended.
Mr. Balfons.
As we move along and get more information, I'd like to be able to compare, apples to apples. So like the same hours, looking at like lead agency versus, the PPS with the wraparound. I'd like to be able to compare and make sure that we're looking at, the same thing when we do that.
Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair. First, as a fun fact, my daughter is actually one of the students. She was an incoming kindergartner last year, and so I've had an opportunity to speak with a lot of folks, out at the playground and at drop-off and pick-up over the last couple of years. And I just wanted to mention that expanding to universal pre-K will alleviate a lot of concern and stress that folks have around the lottery system and around getting into our existing limited space. The costs for pre-K programs in private settings are significant, and looking through, one of the funding sources was sort of a sliding scale of parents or family contribution, and I think that that may be one of the approaches that may seem sort of fair to community members as they look at that. Thank you.
One thing I just wanted to clarify, given what you just said, is that the current target that we just discussed would not get us to universal, so there would still be a lottery. So just to point your attention back to this data, There are 250, and correct me here, Matt, if I'm from all the different numbers we've looked at, but 250 students who didn't attend high-quality pre-K, regardless of socioeconomic status. So anyway, the point is that the target we set was thinking about this equity orientation, but also, where is that? Where do we have the target? But also thinking about, the research about the demographic mix. So we kind of considered that to try to reflect that the new seats would match our demographic mix for the district, and that's how we got to the 140. So anyway, in this particular scenario that we're talking about, we would still have families that are on the waiting list.
Thank you. I appreciate you clarifying that, because clearly I didn't take that in completely. Thank you.
Ms. Morioni?
To Mr. Atkinson's point, though, and I remember those days of how expensive it can be, and although you say it's not for universal pre-K, and we're not looking at that, I'm wondering, though, if, to Mr. Atkinson's point, of some kind of a sliding scale to be projecting out, even beyond 5 years, where do we want to be ultimately? Because I ideally would like to be able to say to parents who maybe can afford that they would still be able to access it, but maybe they would be paying, but maybe not as, I don't know. I'm just still thinking we're not quite meeting all needs. It would be ideal, and maybe we're talking 10, 20 years out, but at the very least, it'd be nice to have some kind of answer to parents who have been on the lottery, never seem to get in, and I get a lot of those emails and calls.
Yes, I do too. And I absolutely get it. So a couple quick thoughts, and then y'all jump in with additional context. I think first, the public pre-K we couldn't have people pay for, correct? So, right, but just like the actual, like, you can't pay for public schools. So the before and after care, to your point, like, let's model out what those costs would be. We would implement a strategy like that, but just to clarify there. And then I would just say the other consideration, this is for discussion to see where your minds are at. There is, a consideration, which is we go for true universal, so not increasing access, but true universal, and that would just increase the number of seats and obviously increase the costs associated with it. So the proposal here is thinking about balancing, our goals around achievement, around equity, the community's vision for this concept, and also being grounded in the reality of a resource-constrained environment. So that's where we came out, but that's another consideration. Would we want more seats than 142?
Just to sort of put some numbers around that, so if you think of, Matt used the number nationally that 85% of, people would access if given this. You can do the math on what the delta is between what, are roughly 270 slots to somewhere in the neighborhood of like the high 400s is what we would need to be able to have to get to that number. If you think of, 500 and roughly 50 students per grade, so 4-year-olds coming into school, so, you would probably have to double what it is that we are proposing today in order to be able to get to that point.
I guess maybe if we're bringing this back to stakeholders and bringing it back to the community, it seems as if we may want to have that still as, okay, this is what we're proposing, this is what it could look like if we're talking universal, and give them the community that entire option. Yeah. Because what we're also trying to do, as you said earlier, is with our capacity in our schools. I mean, I would really hate it if we just said, okay, we're just going to do this, and then the community said, well, wait a minute, we're actually, going back 10 years ago, we thought, and that back then, they wanted universal. So I'm just saying it might be helpful to bring it all on the table. I I don't know if my
I mean,
other colleagues think, but just to...
It's possible to sort of to scale it up and to say what it would look like at 85%. I do also, sort of, because I know Ms. Yuri and Mr. Rodriguez both verbalize concerns that they've heard from private providers that in that model, that is, severe impact, particularly for those providers that are not level 4 quality. So, to the extent that people are actually in, level 2 and 3 daycare scenarios, that would be a significant impact on those. Again, I'm a huge believer in the importance of, making the high quality pre-kindergarten slots available, and we can do the what would it look like at 85% of our population. It's it would be a capacity issue, I believe, for anybody to manage. So I do think that would push us in a different direction, but we can model that out and let you see that as we move forward with those conversations.
Again, maybe I'm the only board member that's thinking that way, but I'd rather be able to bring it to the community, all variations of it, sure. And even let those other providers be able to speak for themselves in all of this, not just us. Thank you.
Mr. Balfont.
Do you guys want to say anything?
Can we go back to the 140 seats? I just want to break that out for, looking at the outcome. So we're looking for enough seats to serve the students for the free and reduced lunch. So is that the 88 students? And then the remainder would be lottery?
It's 45% of that number to get to the 140.
Okay, so 88, would they be under a lottery too? Or would that be separate?
I mean, we think that that's universal coverage. I mean, that's actually the group that we struggle to fill all of our allocation slots with because of all of those constraints that we talk about in another slide that are, things about, access, transportation, before care, after care, all of those kinds of things. So I think that's...
yeah, and I think, in effect, we would be monitoring new seats hit with this particular balance from a demographics perspective. So, I think probably process-wise, we'd have to figure it out. It might still be something similar, but we'd be managing it against that breakdown. Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Sorry, one last one. I was wondering, do we know what are some of our neighboring districts? Is anybody offering pre-K in the state? At least at a significant capacity?
Well, I'll just mention some of what we've looked at. The Data Innovation Project study looked at examples here in Maine and nationally. And there are some good examples within the state of Maine where there are effective district Head Start partnerships. So there's some good models that we can learn from there. There's also good models in the state of Maine of communities that have really gone the community partner route, and so they don't have one lead agency, but they're engaging many different providers. So good insights in both of those approaches. We also, the school readiness consultants suggested to us a number of sort of best practice communities that we looked at that, again, have done a variety of these things. The thing that I will say, especially as we consider the sort of build out 85% capacity, is the cities that have gone that route. And I'll take Boston as example. Boston went the route of trying to do it all through, basically do full universal coverage through the public schools. They've now backtracked and they're engaging community partners. They've found that they really have to go the community route to reach the students they're trying to reach. So we do have lots of resources as we get further into the conversation of some of the communities that we might gain some lessons from.
And really, my last question. Does any of this fall under the capacity of the regional partnership, the Sebago? No, right? This wouldn't be part of what that partnership would take.
No, okay. No, this has not been a discussion. I mean, I know that in the Cumberland County Superintendent's Network that we have talked a lot about the collaboration around the CDS transition, so the special education in early childhood, but there has not been a discussion about I know just from relationships that, so Cumberland, Yarmouth, and Falmouth have been talking about potentially doing a regional partnership for early childhood, and I believe they decided that it wasn't viable for them because of the transportation and things along those lines. I know that we have it somewhere, and I don't know it off the top of my head in terms of what the pre-kindergarten picture looks like in neighboring school districts. I think Matt talked a little bit about some of the examples from the school readiness consultants' work in terms of comparisons at the national level, but we've also done some look at this, and I don't believe that there's anybody in our vicinity that does universal pre-K. I believe Kennebunk is moving in that direction, but I don't know, I don't believe that any of our neighboring districts do.
Good. And of course, I meant high quality.
Yeah.
And of course, I meant at the high quality. Okay.
Yeah.
So I didn't get a chance when I first started talking to thank you for the presentation, Assistant Superintendent. This is something that clearly everybody should be very interested in and ready to dissect and get into these discussions. So, yeah, great job. Appreciate it.
Anyone else? No. Well, I would echo the sentiments of thank you. I think obviously this is a huge priority for our community. I know that when we go knocking on doors for re-election, we hear about it all the time. That's maybe the number one thing we hear from people is universal pre-K. But it's one thing to support it as an idea and another thing to figure out what it really looks like and what are the gaps and how do we address those. So it's clear that you've done a lot of work in that area. So thank you for doing that. I did have a couple of questions. I was wondering, the Boston Public Schools, it says use title funds to support that. Is that an option for us?
So just, okay, well.
Well, we can both do it. We would not get any additional funds right through the Title I, so it would be a reallocation away from what we're currently funding through our Title I grant.
And my other question was, I'm just trying to understand the revenue slide. And so it looks like basically our per pupil, what we actually get per pupil from the state is proportional to what we get in total from the state. Is that correct?
Yes. So essentially, they're not dividing it down by, you get a percentage for this and a percentage for that. What I did was I just took the overall percentage and applied it that way.
And so that's true pretty much for
everything.
Entire state as well, so?
Yes, so for example, Lewiston's receiving, in the 90% of their total allocation, so that, their $7,001 per student for their pre-K program, they're getting, 90% of that number, whereas we're getting 16% of that number.
Wow, and yet they don't offer universal pre-K, or they do? Okay.
They're getting there.
Okay. Well, so I look forward to planning how we're going to get into this work. I imagine probably both the finance and curriculum committees will want to have a hand in this work collaboratively as we go forward. But I find it just really interesting and very good work. So thank you, and I look forward to going forward.
Just very quickly, it's been a team effort, and so I want to thank Matt and our partners, all of you, for your work on this. This has obviously been a lot of work. The last year has really been about coming up with this how do we do this? And so thank you all for your work.
Okay, so that brings us to old business. We have consideration and action to approve the appointments committee. Oh, I'm sorry, we already did that. That brings us to new business. Consideration and action pursuant to sections 2307 and 1485-4 of Title 20A to authorize the superintendent of schools to transfer from available funds budgeted for the FY 2018 fiscal year operating budget not more than 5% of the total appropriation for any cost center to another cost center or among other cost centers of FY 2018 fiscal year operating budget, provided that the total FY 2018 fiscal year operating budget shall not be increased by such transfers. The superintendent shall provide written communication at the time of that such authority is exercised. Is there a motion? Mr. Rodriguez, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. And with the or Ms. Gardner.
I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Gardner.
So it's that time of year where we're asking you for your transfer authority. And so we have two transfers that I'm going to request of you this year. One is an overage in special education of $308,000, and the other is over in debt service. So we're asking to move funds. We decided to try to keep everything in sort of the categories that they belong in. So the transfers for special ed, we're asking to move from regular instruction and other instruction. And we can attribute those over expenditures. About half of it is actual salary and benefits. Could have arisen from, some one-year only ed techs relating to a specific IEPs. So those sort of are what they are. We do what we need to do to meet the needs of students. And I do want to just let you know, overall in salaries and benefits, we are not going over. And in many cases, we're looking at hiring savings to know that we have the ability to be sort of flexible in this category. So this really is just about sort of the state budget categories and those 11 cost centers that we have to move things around. So all in all, we did not exceed our budget. This is really just to sort of check the box for the state budget categories. The other things in special ed are substitutes that we're over, and retirement sick payout, and that's just a function of a number of special ed teachers retired, and where we placed that budget number wasn't where it ended up being expended. So all in all, I wouldn't say these are concerning budget categories, and we did have the ability to move funds around. The other piece is, like I said, in debt service, and for those of you at Finance Committee, you might recall that we talked about our debt schedule did change for Hall School this year. They moved up some of the bond payments, so we did overexpend in our debt service, but we also received additional revenue from the state that was not budgeted because of that. So we actually covered this over expenditure on the revenue side. So we just need to move some funds for this, and we're moving it all out of facilities maintenance to cover the debt service, as it's a similar expenditure. So those are the two items that we need approval for. Does anyone have any questions? Questions? Mr. Atkinson.
Speaking of the additional salary and benefits in reaction to IEPs, is that an indication that we're sort of at a base level of providing ed techs to support our IEPs? Like, are we so low in that that we are forced to, when we have an IEP that pops up that is unexpected, that we have to add
So
staff?
I can certainly say that the first move in any of those things is to always look at our existing capacity within our ed techs and move people around if you can. That's a conversation we've had with Deb Mullis and Malia Nally, a few times. So that's always the first move. So I would say, just in general, we don't overstaff in any of our staffing categories, so we can move people around at will. So, essentially, that would, mean that we're making those moves. Some of that could be to, someone could have retired and we hired an experienced ed tech. So that doesn't necessarily mean we added, 3 positions. It could be a combination of many things. But we certainly don't have, I think, staff that we can move around at will. I think most of the staff, especially in special ed, are there because they're sort of required to be there.
And so can I just also answer that just programmatically? As you know, the IEP governs what the staffing is. So, we make sure that we comply with what the IEP requires. You know, as IEPs change, that brings on, you know, either more or less staffing. So I think that that's what, you know, what governs it. So if we have, you know, students who have more complex needs, that might require additional supports, which might involve additional ed tech, or, you know, or otherwise, you know, if students that require significant resources graduate, move to a different community, we would be able to recover those resources and use them in another way.
Thank you both.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'd ask for public comment. Seeing no public comment on this item, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of voting pursuant to sections 2307 and 1485-4 of Title 20A to authorize the superintendent of schools to transfer from available funds budgeted for the FY18 fiscal year operating budget not more than 5% of the total appropriation for any cost center to another cost center or among other cost centers of FY 2018 fiscal year operating budget, provided that the total FY 2018 fiscal year operating budget shall not be increased by such transfers. The superintendent shall provide written communication at the time that such authority is exercised. Please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. And we do not have personnel this evening. Where it is before the hour of 10 o'clock, we would open it up to public comment on any items not on this evening's agenda. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I'll close public comment and call for a motion for adjournment. Mr. Balfon, seconded by Ms. Thompson. All those in favor? It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative.